And we are live. Hello, Tim.
Hey there. How's it going?
It's doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm good. It's Monday. So there's always that type of energy, but it was a pretty relaxing weekend, so I'm in a good space. How about you?
Also, sunny weather in Belgium, which is a blessing. And yeah, you know, relaxing too. So I'm happy to start the week again.
Yes.
Um, First question I ask every guest here. Um, who is Tim Bradley? And please don't answer talking about work. This is not about the work.
Yes.
This is about the person behind the persona. So you're a person that's very active on social media. I mean, very active. You have a presence. Let's call it like that. And so I'm not talking to the person online. I'm talking to Tim Bradley. So who is Tim Bradley?
Yeah. Um I like to think I'm curious and an explorer, right? I hope to think I'm like an active listener when it comes to conversations. Um I like to be a connector, mostly of people, but also with their ideas too, right? I found at this stage in my career, there's a lot of connections made along the journey that I'm really like humbled by and honored to have had, and so I like to connect those dots together when and where that makes sense. I found it to be very valuable throughout my career, but certainly now. I'm a father of two, so try to be, level-headed and grounded in the day to day, which can be challenging when we're often spending time in this way, like talking to a green dot of a computer to someone virtually somewhere else, right? So try to really be present, and try to say yes when my son says, Dad, can you play Legos? When I know there's myriad other responsibilities happening. But yeah, and I like to travel. So as you and I are talking offline, I'm heading to Amsterdam and Bruges here in a couple weeks. So it'd be cool if we could link up for a coffee or something while I'm over there.
For sure. And like I said, if you need a guide for Bruges, just let me know.
Yeah,
I know I visited that place so many times that I become like when friends or family come and they of course want to go to Bruges, like, hey, like you know the place, like yeah. So
that's
if you need a
perfect.
guide, I can run you through the less touristy places that are interesting.
That would be perfect. We're there for a short period of time, so I'll take the locals, the local tips for sure.
Yeah. It will imply having beer through the way, but like
Oh, that's no problem. Yeah, I figure that's between that and chocolate. My family's just gonna run on that for a few days. So
you mentioned something that piqued my interest um, in this like first question is you mentioned active listener. So not saying that the other guests are not good listeners, but you're the first one that mentions that aspect of his personality. And I found it interesting because that's a rare quality. A lot of people want to take lead on the space. They generally want to talk or say what they think, or like what's their argument. And when in fact sometimes you could like learn to be way more productive by just listening. And you're a father, so being a father implies listening and set aside all the oh,
yeah, redirection and all of that. But yeah, mm.
there's like a theme for every episode. um and for you, like the theme of today is embracing what you're good at. why that theme for you? Because while I was like looking at what you do and Pennant and kind of like your track history, most of motion designers, since we're talking about motion design here,
Mm-hmm.
um, or even live action, they dream about these prestigious gigs with like big brands. Like everybody wants to do a commercial for Nike and
Yep.
or like work for Google or Apple, whatever it is. And you seem to have embraced kind of like a different path with Pennant, which is clearly targeting the B2B and corporate communication, uh, which by many might be seen as like less sexy.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think I kind of know why, but I will still ask the question is like, why did you took that path? That certainly is less sexy, but probably is related to what you're good at.
Yeah, a bit to unpack there. Not dissimilar to your previous guest, Mark Sinosia, right? He and I, gosh, like 20 years ago now, had a good run of collaborations, and we did do some work with the likes of Volcom and Nike and other sort of action sports brands, Burton, et cetera, mostly through like live action and live events type of space, right? So there was a fair bit of that early in my career, the sort of the chasing of the, you know, the sort of quote unquote premier logos, the ones that, consumer goods, like the ones that honestly, like your siblings or your parents might have heard of, you know what I mean? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that's everyone should do a bit of that because there's quite a bit of like humble learnings and plenty of like opportunities to kind of fail fast and learn a bit about yourself along the way. That's like incredibly important. And then that all those sort of like moments of like reflection or introspection or forks in the road, right? Lead you to where I think you're actually intended to go in the long run, right? So yeah, I came up in DIY action sports and production largely. So classic, like got out of high school, moved to California to do the snowboard thing, and opened my first credit card. Dropped, like too many thousands of dollars on a MacBook Pro and a Panasonic camera, right? And I'm like, this is what I'm going to do, right? And there was so much learning by just being immersed in it every day, and I think what I'm realizing now is that was really like leading with passion, right? With just sort of like your reason to get out of bed every morning should be the driver, and less so the like allure of a NASCAR slide or a wall of logos at the end of the day, right? So I'll pause there for a second. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So for that, there's so much filming, right? That then turn into editing, that turn into producing, that turn into liaising with talent and with locations and with people. And then suddenly that was with brands and with resorts and with entities that were coming at it from a business POV, right? So point of view. So that freelance mentality dually helped me like learn craft, plenty of mistakes, plenty of white balance problems, right? Just kind of things that are intrinsic to just the doing of the thing, while also I had to be responsible for a vision and for a set of deliverables, frankly, right? When it came to working with brands and working with resorts and et cetera. So all that sort of honed me. And then when we moved back, this was my girlfriend at the time and now wife. When we moved back to Massachusetts, there was a pretty big gap, mostly in my network, right? Like I had spent the better part of 4 or 5 years in California building a network there. And so this was a pretty important crossroads early in my career. I'm sort of in my mid 20s at this point where I didn't have that network that could keep me active and participating and showing up as the creative self I wanted to be, to help spur the next project to produce, right? And so I during that gap, that hole, I realized how important that network is, right? And so having to start all over again was like a huge life lesson that I had in that moment. And so I've taken a tremendous amount of pride and care, like since that time, fast forward, 15 years or whatever, to just like really honor and cherish the individuals that are part of that network, right? Because all of those connections are what afford creatives like us the opportunity to show up and do the things we aspire to do, or for the brands or the networks or the things we aspire to produce for, right? um yeah, so during that time I was fortunate enough to get inside an agency. And speaking of like networking opportunities, right? It's like being inside an agency for what ended up being 12 years was just such an eye opener to business and to your own sense of like self and where you fit into a greater system, and your sense of sort of posture, right? And how you show up and present yourself every day. And all of those learnings have really build momentum, build confidence over time, right? And I've tried my best to take hold of those opportunities every instance. There was also a ton of doing, right? Like tons of production, tons of leading teams of motion designers. I had at one point 8 motion designers on my team, so we did 2D, vector, character, 3D, really ran the gamut. And that was amazing and inspiring to see, just sort of like creativity flourish through the entities of the individuals that comprised our team, right? So honestly, like all of that has just led me to this moment where a lot of reflection, and I was turning the corner of 40 years old, and I had a family, and it was just this this is the time that I really want to take a big swing, and take the bet on myself and on the relationships and the networks and the skills and the ability to show up and be consistent that I've like fostered for decades, right? And so that was one of two reasons to start Pennant. You astutely said like we are largely B2B focused, which is like one like niche area for us, but we've come at it, I think, a little differently than most when it comes to our differentiation, right? Where we're coming to the table with an IP that's pretty unique. I think this framework that we use to describe our creative process and help um, our marketing buyers really understand where we fit into their greater agency vendor equation. We also come to the table with a sense of purpose when it comes to the buyer's journey, right? When we talk about marketing, we're squarely in the middle of the funnel. We don't aspire for, I mean, it's great if we get the opportunities, but we don't chase the awareness play, which is really a lot of what started this whole conversation when trying to produce work for the Nikes and et cetera of the world. But we also don't want to do the bottom of the funnel, which should really be uh, done by teams that are now in-house inside brands, right? Like most every brand that's worth its salt this day and age has a team, because they know they need to invest in this creative medium of video, quote unquote, right? So we love supporting brands like that in that way, because they've like bought into the point, like there's an adoption of the medium that it's been sold into as a way of being, of a way of culture, of a way of showing up in the marketplace. That's like a kind of a hard turn to make for a lot of brands. So when they do, we really commend them for that. But anyway, so our framework, our middle of the funnel focus, and then the set of values, I think, is where we're really driving here. Values being safety, security, sustainability, right? Like these values that these brands and the people behind them really, really cherish. And that's their reason for being, their why, right, for what they do in the marketplace. And so,
Can I pause you for a
yeah,
second?
please, yeah.
Okay, because you're pitching me Pennant, and
Well,
and that
I
and
want
that
to give
was
that context
that
though.
wasn't exactly the question.
Right.
The question was more about, like you said, you did the shiny things earlier
Yep.
in your career, and you said like, okay, this is driven by passion, but you also said that that's not enough. Just having passion and having skills is not enough.
It,
You have to rely on two other things. And my question was more kind of like focused on the moment where you kind of like found what you're good at.
yep.
Because the reason, like, tell me if I'm wrong, but the reason you're targeting B2B and the more kind of like corporate sector, it's because you're good at talking with them. You know, like from looking at your website is not even like showing a project or like a case study. Your website is almost like an explainer. Um, and so my question was more about like that moment of realization where you went like, okay, I want to do work for this niche because I'm really good at this thing. That was my question.
Perfect. And I'm glad you cut me off, because my point that I was about to totally skip over was like the values that these brands and the people behind them inherit is the thing that was really this Venn diagram of where I've arrived at in my career, in that sort of aha moment, right? So it's like, sure, that, and I didn't mean it for be a pitch. I was hoping it was
No,
more
no, 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 no.
context
I'm
setting.
saying
So
this
like, I
in a friendly
appreciate
way.
it. I love it. So yes, the like, how do we show up differently to compete and to provide value? Where our area of focus in, and then a set of values that mirrors our own, right? So my point with being that safety, security, sustainability set of values is that that isn't necessarily the set of values that a lot of these like other brands uh really embody, and that's like totally fine. It's just what I know gets me out of bed every morning, what gets our team rallied around producing work that we're ultimately proud of, right? At the end of the day, because like that, like, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, of course. So a lot of the work that we are producing in this industry is hyper and super subjective. And so to show up with that sense of purpose, that you know that who you are aspiring to work with and work for and collaborate with is doing putting their best selves into their work and into their world, of being champions of what they embody with a set of values, is really the thing that is that turning point for us, right? Is that reason for why Pennant exists.
Yeah, I mean, when I was like looking at Pennant and kind of like your track record is, to me, you became more and more like a strategist
Yeah.
instead of like purely a creative in a way. And the reason like I thought this like podcast with you was interesting is because I always like to show in the podcast like how much diversity there is in what we do. Like people tend to focus on the craft purely. Like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm going to be a 3D motion designer. I'm going to be sculpting in ZBrush. I'm going to be doing animation in After Effects, whatever. But there's very too little talk about kind of like the strategic approach. And what I find interesting about the strategic angle, it's because you're not thinking anymore in the sense of like what's in the beauty of it. It's not like about it if it has to be beautiful or like very well designed. It's like it's more about, like you said, the results. Like I'm at point A and I have to arrive at point B for the client. Which path leads to Rome, in a way? And Kevin Rapp like briefly touched this in another recording of the podcast where he was talking about like the ugly ads.
Right.
And he was saying like some of the ads that like people will never show on their like um, resumes or like portfolios are the ones that like did like the biggest numbers for us. Um, and he was super proud about it because in the end, sure, it's not a piece of art, but like, did it accomplish the mission that it was set for the client? 200%.
Right.
Um, so I was curious, like, what was your, yeah, take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great take, and I think you can have both, and you should always aspire to produce the best quality thing you can given the parameters that are in front of you. Of course, the deadline, the guardrails of budget, the bandwidth you really have to support it, the aesthetic that the brand or the project like embodies or encourages. So all of that to me is like really kind of table stakes, is that we're going to show up and be the best creatives with the best set of craft and purpose as we can, right? That's starting with your sense of purpose. So like, okay, and passion, right? Like I'm going to produce the best thing that I can, but those guardrails are against you at any given time, right? Or they help shape like what the final output is, the final deliverable is, right? And like, to lean into Kevin's reference, yeah, I have so many of those where it's like the qualitative feedback is so much more impressive than the quantitative of views or impressions or engagement, right? It's like the things that happened inside the business that help subtly like create a paradigm shift in how they approach whatever their business purpose is, or leading with video is honestly like one of the bigger key drivers, right? Like leading with the medium um is a huge aha moment for the brands, and I think that's just a win for our industry at large, right? So I think that's a really important like thing to consider, is that while sure, maybe you're racking up a few hundred, few thousand views compared to, again, the Nikes that are getting millions of views. It's like, I'm not sure that defines like purpose, right? Or passion, or like should be the lead in what you're doing, when you don't necessarily know what that impact really is at the end of the day. Is that impact driving sales of footwear? That's awesome, but if you don't know the results of that from the teams, that's internal, there's not as much you can like aspire to there, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's a balancing act for sure. And I that's the creative challenge that is really, I don't know, I think it's the reason most of us do this in the first place, is that it's like the blank sheet of paper, the blank screen doesn't really scare us anymore, right? It's like, you're going to get through the creative process, the mess, to come out to the other side, and you've put yourself into the project enough that you're happy with whatever it is that you've produced at the end of the day. And then it's not yours anymore, right? And in fact, was it ever really yours? It was always the client's like goal that you're producing towards, and then it's out in the world. There's only so much you have control over, right, when it comes to things like distribution and engagement and sales and all of that. So to me, the feedback I get from the individuals that we are producing the work on behalf, so like the marketers, right, like their feedback, most of it is pretty emotionally like tons of emotion behind it, right? Is the things that we know that this was a success or not. And then things like ROI and engagement and statistics on view count and things like that are kind of like icing or sprinkles on the cake of what we actually did in that moment.
Like I'm gonna connect this with a couple things. Um, you like again, you mentioned earlier like being an active listener, and to me, like being a good strategist, whatever industry you are in, is about also like listening. So yeah, of course, there's your expertise, but like there's a phrase I hate when that creatives say very often is like, we have to educate the client.
Mm,
I hate it because that implies that we are in some way superior
right.
and that we know better. When in fact, when you're working with a client that's in the, I don't know, medical sector, you don't know shit about the medical sector. Sure, yeah, you know that this is a toothbrush, this might be an injection, and this is like a scanner. But other than that, you don't know anything about the intricacies of the whole structure. But the client has an expertise on that. And so we have to like separate like the craft. So we wanted this to look awesome and what the request is. And sometimes the request doesn't ask you for Michelangelo
Right.
because their target audience is not sensitive to that. They're not open to that thing. It's not what they're looking for. The same way, like you work for business to business, and very often what they're looking for is like outcomes. Like, is this gonna like fulfill the outcome I'm looking for? Which can be a myriad of things. And so you have to be like open to listen to the client. And sometimes, yes, their feedback will be a pain in the neck for sure, but it doesn't come from nowhere. And like, we all like to tell stories about like, oh, my cousin said he didn't like it, but
I know.
those are like very few ones.
Very
Like
few.
generally, the feedback comes from like a room full of people. They all have different expertise. They all have like their own, like, of course, life experiences. And when you get that feedback, it's a concentrated juice of like all these different perspectives. And sometimes it's hard to make those live together. That's why where we play our part. It's like, okay, with all these voices, how can I harmonize them to make this thing? And that's kind of like the feeling I had when I kind of like went through your profile and your also like what Pennant proposes as a service, you know, which is again like very B2B and business oriented. But again, like I said, it's like there's no shame in that at all, because everybody is good at, like, you have to embrace what you're good at. But
Correct.
now my question is do you miss the shiny thing or not at all? It's like, because that choice like brought a lot of changes, of course, but also opened a whole other world to you.
Yeah. Back to your education question, or we have to educate the clients comment. I I agree. It's not the right flavor. I like guide, right? Like your guide, like you're on a mission together, and you're the creative guide to work towards the perceived destination, right? And maybe there's like, if we're using this map analogy, little spurs or little moments to pause and like assure that you're taking the right course, right? But at the end of the day, to be that guide, I think, is the most important thing. When it comes to the shininess, right? I don't know. Again, I keep bringing it back to the sense of values, right? And it's because I just know that the brands we're working with are trying to assure that, which takes cybersecurity, for example, like to assure that people's business and well-being and personal identification is secured, right? That it's like it's set out there to uh dissuade bad actors and to make sure that what we want to do digitally online is secure in that way, right? So it's like there's tremendous sort of power in that set of values. And then of course anything healthcare, med tech, life sciences related, it's like to make sure that we can all live the longest life and most healthy life possible, right? As a society, that's tremendous power. And then sustainability, that climate tech, that green tech, the technologies that are going to ideally help us clean up this earth and make sure that our this next generation, our kids can sustain, right? Like that is such a higher power calling, I guess. So I think a lot of it is because of that. Those sets of values don't necessarily align with some of the brands that we spoke about earlier, because it's just not in the sectors that inspire me. You know what I mean? So it's like that. I guess now that we're saying it out loud, it's kind of that cross section of like what you're passionate about and what inspires you, right? And like where you can show up as that creative, as that person with craft to help support those brands and initiatives that align with those sets of values, you know? So yeah, I think for me, it was just like, I was fortunate enough to sort of recognize that early in my career. And I think there's a lot of people behind the scenes too that sort of push you in one direction or the other when it comes to the brand teams too, right? It's just, you can tell when their hearts are in it and when their values are aligned and when their passions are clear and where they're trying to go as professionals on behalf of an industry at large. So I think that's the most simplest, is that those the passions and inspirations and the sets of values ended up aligning for me, and that's where I am today.
Yeah, like I've worked on some projects and with like a lot of people around the table, uh, and for like international stuff. And I think there's nothing more kind of like fun when you get everybody around the table excited,
Yeah,
and not only they are excited, but you can feel they feel understood. Um, and I think that's a segment as where we creatives can do better, because we're not doing this project for us. It's like they didn't hire us to like show to the world how creatives we are. It's like they hired us because they have this thing they want to solve. And I think like a lot of the sometimes of the friction comes from like that like miscommunication between the two. And I've worked with teams that were renowned to be like super hard to work with. Um, and in the end, it went like super smoothly. And again, there was like this excitement, and as they get excited, then they get like more open, also, because it's like you have to give a little to like receive a
sure,
little.
sure.
And so you get them excited, and then they get more flexible into accepting a different vision. Like you said, like you can guide them through different flavors, because they've been eating potatoes for all their lives, like potato every day. And so, of course, when you ate potatoes all your life, if suddenly they make you taste sushi, that's gonna like it's gonna be a shock.
Yep.
You have to go little by little. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's like, and especially I think into the B2B and corporate like communication business. Um, and once you gain like the trust, then that's where you really get to kind of like um explore with them.
Yeah, exactly. Like ideal scenario is that you at the beginning of a many-yeared relationship with the individuals and certainly the business, right? Like at my old agency, I was fortunate to work very closely on dozens, if not hundreds, of projects with one brand. 10 years, another brand, 8 years, another brand, 6 years, right? And it's like, with each of those increments of, I'm using increments by way of like projects, you can push creative a little bit further, or you can experiment a little bit more openly, in a conversational way, in a brainstorm or whatever, where you're trying to push it, because you built trust based on the success of the last project, right? And usually once you're inside of a brand, there's any number of other, like, stakeholders or people that you can work with, based on departments, based on initiatives, based on, you know, brand versus product marketing versus customer marketing, right? Like these are all opportunities to leverage story, leverage craft, and your creative to support this brand and push them incrementally forward, with good work, right? And with each of those is a track record you're building, which equals trust, and a belief and that you're going to show up and produce the best thing that you can for them each and every time. So it becomes less a question of like, can they pull this off? It's more like, what do you think they're going to bring to the table next time that gets me, that keeps my, that stoke, that excitement alive that you alluded to, right? Because yeah, I mean, we, I don't really like the term, but like we get to kind of be magicians, right? When it comes to the creative and the craft with live action and motion design, it's like these are skill sets that take tens of thousands of hours to hone and be successful at, right? And the people that we're working with inside of brands, like they respect the hell out of that, you know? So it's just like being able to bridge that trust gap is the best thing that you can do. And the earliest thing for that is to just be a good listener, right? Like understand like sure what the business goals are, sure what the campaign is saying it needs to do, sure what the product launch needs to look like, but also like the people that you're interfacing with, and like what other plates do they have spinning in the background, like what are the challenges they've had internally with sort of getting leadership buy-in to things, like what are the friction points they've seen time over time, and just like all those little pieces of information not only make like put you on the path to success, but just make you that trusted partner that they really are looking for you to do. Like the creative is table stakes, right? Like they know you can produce and make good work, but like, can you do it in a way that you can be that guide, that confidant, that trusted person? I think is really what defines success.
Especially when I think, I mean, you know, we've been in the like audiovisual industry for like through different like eras. It
Mhm.
fluctuates with time, but like I think we're now again in an era where I think agencies become less and less relevant currently. I mean, I mean, at least here in Europe, we can feel that agencies are having a hard time,
Sure, here too.
and it's becoming like more and more a direct to brand work. Most of the clients now have like, I wouldn't say internal agencies, but they have like an internal cell,
Yep.
kind of like taking care of part of the ideas of or like already kind of like working on what they want to communicate. And so that that skill of being a good listener, and like you mentioned magician, to me it's like it's more like an alchemist.
I like that. Yeah, yeah, because I've never really
It's
like.
like mixing brews of stuff, and so you take your stuff, but like everything they gave you, and then you start mixing it so it makes sense, so they can feel listened, and also you're having also fun because it's important like to still have fun in what we do, and then you sprinkle it with a little bit of other things, and then like that gives you like a potion, um and um and I mean,
But not a magic potion. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, I mean, I wish. um
Sorry, couldn't help myself.
No, 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 of course. It's like I don't know if you know that if you have this in America, there's like a very, very here we don't call it comic books. It's called bande dessinée, and it's like a whole. There's like a whole culture around it, and there's like these characters from the that were drawn in the 70s, which were called Asterix and Obelix, and they are from the Roman era, like Roman Empire. And it's they live in this like little town, this little village that remains like unconquered by Caesar. And because one of the like the druid of the village managed to invent this magic potion that that gives them like incredible strength. And so I mean it's a whole story, this whole thing,
Sure.
because it's very rich in culture, and it's like every historical fact is correct. It's very well written, so like the quality is very, very good. um but coming back to the magic potion is like, so it's kind of like a superpower, you know,
Yeah.
to kind of like be able to brew all those things together and have them make sense, um in such like different industries. Because again, you mentioned you could be working for tech, for like cybersecurity, and then the next day working with a humanitarian service,
Mhm.
um, and they have completely different messaging,
And different
language,
audiences.
yeah,
Build.
language, audiences, like the people you will meet are different, like differently minded. So how do you like, this is not a question for me, but it's more like for the younger audience that might be listening to this, is like, how do you kind of like switch your brain through those things?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is as simple as doing cursory homework, right? You have to understand who you're talking to. Um, you could get as robust as developing like ideal customer profiles or ICPs to understand, like, based on their role, based on their geography, based on where they are in their business, like they have a type of way of working, right? But I think before all that is like invest your time into understanding what this brand is all about, who are the people that you're going to be interfacing with, like, you know like just check them out on LinkedIn at a minimum, but survey their YouTube channel, survey all of the things that help you put yourself in their shoes, right? So the simplest thing I've embraced, and I like to share with folks, is like, I like to lead with like the double high five. One hand being sympathy for the people we're working with, for our buyers, right? Understanding and leading with sympathy that they have many other things going on. They have tremendous pressures internally, externally, right? They have KPIs to hit. They have like really important goals for where they aspire to be in their own career, right? So being sympathetic to where they are in their journey, huge, huge. The second hand in the high five is empathy for their audience, right? Why are they researching this brand that you're working for in the first place, right? Like what is the pain point that they are trying to find a solution for, right? Like where are they in their buyer's journey, to understand how you speak to them, and also like how do they like to be spoken to, and where, and what sort of volume, so there's just kind of a lot of considerations, and it's really hard to do both and to be objective along the way, right? Like, you ultimately, as creatives, like, you need to be serving your audience as much as possible, arguably more than your client, right? Sometimes the clients, they, for better and worse, like they can't get out of their own way, you know what I mean? And so it's like, success should be defined by how the audience is receiving it, and there's a feedback loop to your client, right? That will, if the process is a success in the eyes of the audience, then it's a success in the eyes of your client, right? So being that alchemist, I guess, is the analogy we're using here, right? Is like mixing those perspectives to make sure that we're being the right guide for our client to be received by the audience in the right way.
I don't know if you have this, like, when I'm in like the early phases of a project, and I'm doing like all the research.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to me, it's almost like being schizophrenic. It's like getting your like putting yourself in the skin of somebody else,
Yeah,
uh, and like go through the same states as they go. And of course, like you have like unharmful projects, like, I don't know, like they're selling this like product, whatever. But like I've worked for humanitarian projects where I get to like work on 2 weeks, 3 weeks on documentation or footage that is like really hard,
sure.
like super hard. And then like I have to cope for 2 weeks, like I don't sleep well and everything, because I'm still with all these things into my head. But that also kind of like allows me to convey better the message that they are seeking to spread out. Um,
Yeah,
and
being
I always
immersed.
say this is like, get into other people's like shoes, because in the end we're selling a service, and you have to be kind of like service minded, like ultimately, um, at least like in these humanitarian projects I mentioned, I wasn't there to reflect my vision on that topic. Like that's like, for example, with the humanitarian sector, what's like that it's a big difference. Sure, you can do something like visual, you can craft metaphors and everything, but in the end, the message needs to be grounded in an absolute truth. It has to reflect what is happening, um, and convey what the people are going through, like the hardship and everything. Um, and so I think in a less dramatic way, the same applies for what we do for other clients. Like you mentioned cybersecurity. Like imagine, like again, I'm going to give an example like from the top of my head that's a little bit more dramatic, but you've been working for this amount of years in something, and then you get hacked and your whole hard drive gets scripted. And then you just lost years of work. Um, and that puts you in a mental and emotional state, um, that if you don't stop and start reflecting on that, it's not just like, oh, he got hacked and he has a worm and then he spammed some emails. It can be way worse. And it's like they ask for ransom. And so some people are so attached to what they are losing, they pay the ransom, knowing that there's like 80% chances they will never see their work back anyway. So it's all like this thing unfolding. And I think once you kind of like get into, like I said, into this schizophrenic state, you get to kind of like then deliver something that's truly authentic for your client in the end and for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. That immersion, right? And that's that doing your homework, doing your research, better under like interviewing, like asking people that have had this lived experience, like all of these opportunities that you have as the creative, as a producer. Like it's your responsibility to take ownership of that and be accountable to the work, right, that you're inspired to do. And so I think that's really imperative, is like get under the hood is the analogy I use too, right? Like really try to live in the shoes of this audience as best as you can, based on the timeline you have and the resources you have, and like what the project can kind of afford based on those guardrails. But doing that will assure that you are making sound decisions, you are being the right guide you want to be for your client, right, and of service to your audience at the end of the day. We say this all the time, that like our responsibility is to empower decision making, right? Like the content that we're putting out for our brand clients, right? It should serve the audience to help them make a decision, whether to buy now, whether to buy later, whether to reach out, whether it's, or just like, this actually isn't for me, and that's okay. Like that's actually the purpose of marketing too, is to like push away the people that are not the best fit for this, right? So that empowering decision making carries a lot of onus, a lot of responsibility, right? So doing what you just described is really mission critical.
I'm going to make like a super hard pivot
Okay.
to kind of like disrupt a little bit the conversation. Um, so we've been talking a lot about the work and the
Mhm.
way we approach the work, and what strategy kind of is. Now, that's like, say, one side of your life.
Okay.
Then there's the other side of your life, which is your family and I don't know, your hobbies, whatever it is. And sometimes those two are kind of like, I'm not going to say hard to conceal, but there's like some like friction overlappings
Sure.
in there. And I mean, you've been in this industry for a while, me too. So through the years, I kind of like, we've learned to kind of like put some like oil in those frictions places so it slides a little bit better.
Nice.
Um, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that, on like, how, what does it mean to be as involved in the work you're doing, but how then you compensate on the other end.
Yeah, I mean, I I noticed you appropriately didn't say work life balance, because I don't think that's like really a thing, right? I describe it as like a pendulum. So it's always in motion, it's always swinging. It's just like the thing that you might have more control over is the like velocity that it's moving at, the like arc of that swing. For me, that disruption, that friction, the challenge is when there's just huge, vast swings from side to side, right? Like that's when I'm not at center. I know I'm not serving either part of my life like as like clearly as I can, as sort of like in the moment. Some of that is just recognizing that this work, this career, it's so project based that it comes in waves, is the way I describe it, right? Where there's just like tremendous momentum being built. Suddenly you have this big swell of work and opportunity, and you have to ride it, right? But man, it is really challenging when it comes to the family aspect of things. So and honestly, like when I started Pennant, like that was really pretty like a challenging moment in my family too, because there was just so much extra pressure, extra investment, extra all the things, right? So that was a it was pretty hard, those like first 6 9 months, and just trying to find that close to center again, right, from that big swing. I found that a lot of it really boiled down to the basics of just like communication, just like expressing to my wife like where I'm at in the day, describing the details of what happened, like drawing her into where I'm at, sort of emotionally in the day to day based on the thousands of decisions that I had to make, right? I still think that's an area I'm constantly trying to improve, is just my communication with my life partner in that way, right? Because it's hard when she's not a creative, she's not a business owner. There's just so much that you're like alone with. But the more you can describe what those challenges are, what the wins are, especially what the little moments of frustration are, like that assures the bond that you're actually in life with, right? But also like sort of helps you exercise um I don't know, just exercise like your own web of thoughts that are in your head, right? So I think that type of like as much communication as possible with your partner is like such a huge help. For us, it's really boiled down to a couple things. Like one is just like a set day, tends to be Sundays, where it's just like we just communicate what is going to happen this week, right? Like what are the gotchas, meaning like what are the moments where we have a scheduling conflict, like where can we make sure we're most present in our life, right? Like my son does karate, so it's like cool, we both want to show up and just be present to his experience at the dojo and not be like on a device like scrolling through emails and things like that. What are those milestones that we need to show up for, and then back into the work, right? Like, okay, well, I have this event, I have this networking thing, I have this, whatever, this travel, whatever it is, right? And like now we're troubleshooting together, right? To like make sure we're setting the right expectations for our family in that way. So it's both like in the daily of just like one of my favorite parts of the day actually is so my son is 6 and my daughter is 9, and we have this routine that just kind of happened naturally, where when we sit down around the dinner table, we just go around the room and just be like, well, how was our day, right? Is like the sort of simplest of prompts. But then it's just sort of is like, well, what was that thing that you learned? Or like, what was the thing that was the most challenging? Or was there something that upset you? Just sort of these singular little prompts that goes around the room, produces such like an open dialogue. Like we get to really understand like where we each are sort of emotionally, like where we're finding challenge. Either, I mean, often it's, like with my kids, it's sometimes with each other, but just sort of how do we how do
Yeah.
we help them through their own
And I was gonna say,
yeah,
depending if your kid wants to communicate, because sometimes
yeah,
it's like, "Hey, what's your day? Fine.
totally, yeah,
No,
no, that's why
something
those like
happened? Like, no. Like, no, nothing happened. You didn't talk to anybody.
I
Yeah, I
know.
talked with my friends. So
Well,
what they were saying? No, nothing. Like, and then like 3 months later, they start like unraveling this whole like super complex story that happened like 3 months ago. It's like, why did you tell
yeah,
me?
where
Like,
where was that? I know,
yeah, yeah.
I
No,
know,
because at that time it didn't feel like telling you the story. It was like
I know.
awesome.
The way, man, there's not it's not like so much you can do about that, unfortunately. But I've
Nope.
I've found that like by me describing my day, by my wife describing our day, like it's at a minimum showcasing like an open space, a safe space to like have this type of dialogue. And most days the kids are participating in their own way, right? And so the hope is that that type of space and habit building is just like produces, I don't know, that safety that we're trying to embody, right? That like this is a safe space to have hard conversations, a safe space to talk through challenging moments, right? So they're young right now, but the goal is that produces that type of space in the long run, right? Um, but yeah, I
It-
mean that just boils down to communication too, right? And it's
yeah.
it's it's
So
really hard. It's really hard.
that's the reason why I asked you this question. It wasn't an innocent, like out of nowhere question. Is we are in a business where we spend our time while we work communicating, like
Yeah,
talking, listening, taking notes, taking into account what the client said, implementing into our workflow and everything is like, and then it's like, why many of us like suck so freaking much at doing it in their personal lives. It's like just
yeah,
let's just listen to the person in front of you. Like, what is she or he or they them are telling you? It's like, and then, but like for some, I don't understand. Like, if our brain sometimes goes like, I had enough for the day of communicating. Like, I enter in this like hermit mode,
yeah.
and like PJ Richardson like from Laundry had
Mhm.
like he said something great when we were recording the podcast together. He said like he was getting back home and he spent like the whole freaking day like fighting with like a difficult client, a difficult project, like the staff, this and that, like shit that went backwards. And then like he gets home and like because all of that dragged his day long, then he has like another fight waiting at home. And he's like, please, can we fight tomorrow? Because like today
Full
I
out.
thought all day long I cannot do it anymore. It's like if you want we can fight tomorrow about it. Um
So
but yeah,
so
it's like
true.
why do we
Yeah.
stuck so much at it like in the beginning? Because you're doing it like you're killing it at work. Like why not like do this like apply kind of like the same principles with the people that are close to you? And like and you mentioned kids, like especially kids, like even if you're right, like if you know intrinsically that you're right, like you still have to listen. You still have to
Yes.
let them explain, express the frustration, the things they're going through. And once they get that out of their system, then you get to step in and like again, potatoes all day, all life. So start giving sushi little by little, and then don't go there with like frontal hit, and then you can get your message across, and you end up again playing the alchemist, like blending points of view and stuff like that. So, but that's something that always struck me. It's like people that are like amazing communicators in their work, and then in their personal life, you go like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like, just do the same. Just apply the same methodology, and you're golden. But it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
what you just
emotional.
described was exactly that first, half year of starting the business is just like I gave everything that I could to the 9 to 5, and then I was out of gas, out of energy, and a lot of it's just like I don't even know how to begin unpacking what all of the things that just happened. Like you have to. You have to put that extra time and it like it's not investment, but it's like it is. It's like this relationship, like you have to continue feeding it and supporting it, and the best way to do that is to show up and provide just insight. They just want to be let in, and vice versa. So yeah, it took a lot of time and several warranted arguments to just like recognize that, yeah, I as you just described, you have to muster up that extra energy, that extra output to assure your pendulum's not swinging so wildly back and
It's not
forth.
hitting you in the face. It's like,
Correct. Yeah, exactly. I love that question.
um, you know, kind of like about talking about the pendulum, not so much about family now, but more about like kind of like the industry in which we are, which is also like a pendulum and has phases and like evolves. And like right now, our sector is like seriously morphing
Hmm.
on different aspects. And I was curious as a strategist, like because some stuff is changing and some stuff remains the same under the hood. You know, it's just that like the shape and form is kind of different, but the like the grounded truth is the same. But what's your stance like about the current market? And I'm asking you this question because I've been asking this like the last guests to have like different like perspectives on
Hmm.
it. You know, the market is kind of like very insecure right now. Um, and so since you're working with a certain like spectrum of the market, like what's your stance and what's your position right now in this like whole maelstrom?
Yeah, it's and it's funny you're asking that today, as like markets are crazy, crazy volatile, right? It's it's emotionally pretty challenging, right? But the best thing that I know I can do and my team can do is show up, right? And provide value and be the the connectors that we know we're good at, connections of ideas and of people, and that sort of resolve, like that mental resolve of just like, going to be persistent and consistent and show up uh, in that way. If you can do that, like that is where that momentum is built over time and days and days. So I think that's like baseline for us. As far as the markets, right, or like the industries, that's why we have these, sort of broad set of three, is that like we're not so deeply invested into any one that if one of those collapsed for any reason, that we don't have anything else to stand on, so it's like that little bit of diversification of like those types of industries helps assure that like we'll always have some leg of a tripod to put down. The other is just we're hedging our bets because these are industries of like tremendous innovation, right? They're in a constant state of innovation and therefore competition, and therefore need good creative to help differentiate who they are, demonstrate what they do, validate their offering, right? So like that really is like reassuring, right? That like these are going to be kind of a constant. So those the combination of those two constants, right? Of like the industries as well as just the way we show up and posture ourselves every day, like that should assure some semblance of alignment in the long run, right? Now, is that as easy as every day, right? When we're watching cash flow ebb and flow, it's hard, frankly, right? So I think it's just that like that's the resolve that you have to have in your passions and your sense of values, that those will continue to serve you in the long run, and get you through the ebbs and flows of the day to day. I also think it's like you got to do some reflection, both like personally and in the books, right? Like the business books, of like to see how far you've come, to see trends, to see like the details that are intrinsic to like project over project, right? Like in the data, so to speak. But looking backwards will help you feel confident in the direction that you're going, as well as like help guide your North Star a little bit more clearly, right? So I think that's it's a combination of all of that. What are you seeing? What do you say?
No, I mean, you know, I will bounce first on like two things you mentioned. I think these are moments where your connections and your network can really
Mhm.
save you. Um,
Big time.
because out of nowhere, I mean, or if you're having a hard time, you can verbalize it. Like very few people openly say, um, yeah, times are rough right now. everybody on LinkedIn is like a six-figure CEO of whatever. Everybody's preaching success when we all know that if you're on LinkedIn screaming "I'm successful," it's that probably
Yeah, a
you're
cry
not
for help.
you're not as successful as you're
Yeah.
saying, and you're looking for like attention. That, and also like I think what's also important in what you said is like running a company um, can be really tough. Um, like this is something that was mentioned by Thanos, Motion Punk, and also by Rogier Hendricks, which both like started running a company with a mate, and then things got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then like the two of them like felt like kind of like crushed uh, by the weight of it. Like yeah, having to pay people like you said, like cash flow and things like that, where sometimes you're kind of like borderline, with things, and that's a mentality that's not like it's not for everybody. um and I think it's always important because like I mentioned earlier, we are in a more direct to client era, entering in that more direct to client era. But it's not just like saying like, oh, now I will start working with like brands. it's
Right.
it's just
No.
it's not just that. It's like you will have to handle a lot of other stuff that like previously was handled by the agency, that you were not taking care of, but now it's on you, because the client, even if they're switching like from like ice cream vendor, they will be expecting kind of like the same things in a way. um Now on my end, how do I see it is, I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, is like I think one of the things we're assisting in our industry, like motion design particularly, is like the pruning of all the people that got into the motion bandwagon during COVID. Like COVID
Yeah.
was a moment where like companies were spending stupid money on whoever could make videos, and were like paying like insane rates for whatever. That's how we ended up with people that are 20 years old and saying like, I'm a creative director. Like fine. Um, and I think now what we're seeing now is like, of course, like economical recession, which always like kind of like trims the tree. But the trim here is like way more dramatic, because all these people that during COVID went like, oh, I'm gonna make animation. Like, are they gonna stick with it?
Right.
You know, or not? Are they gonna change careers? Um, because they haven't been in this industry long enough to kind of like know all these like ups and downs, and like all the circles and all the things. And so it's somewhat like painful to watch, but I think in a way it's like a natural development, in a way, like for that part of this of the sector. Then for the other part, like purely business, um I think it's hard to tell. I do feel like creativity will always be needed. um but you know how it goes when economical recession happens. Like the first thing to be trimmed off by companies is communication,
Yep.
generally. For good or for better, for good, I don't know, but like, so that's one of the first branches they cut from the tree. So yeah, I do feel we're gonna travel some like shaky moments, but like those that like remain. And I think those that will not only remain, but also kind of like are clever enough to navigate this. Um, I don't want to talk about AI here, but like just saying AI is one of the disruptors
Yep.
in our industry currently. And I think we are kind of like experiencing now what the NFT was when that came out. It's like the gold run. It's like
Sure.
people trying to make like, or whatever money they can do with this thing, and selling like charlatans, whatever. And that brings a lot of like pressure and insecurities like on creatives. In the end, I think, not talking about generative AI here, it's going to be part of the tool set. Like, I was just reading today, like Resolve, which is like an editing, grading,
Sure.
and sound mastering, compositing software. They've just like announced like their version 20, and it has a lot of AI tools in it. But all of the tools are not like doing the work for me. They're just like helping me on tedious tasks that before would take me a lot of time. And I'm all for that. Like, please do the roto for me. Do it.
Sure.
um but yeah, it's like, I think like there's gonna be still tough times ahead for a few of us, quite a few of us, until things settle down and market like kind of like settles down a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. And two things you said that stood out is like the people that got into this for the right reason, or for the reasons that really it's passion, right? Like I think that that will prune itself or prove itself either way. And with AI, like a lot of what you just described is it's making things faster, like process wise, or like quote unquote easier and therefore faster. And like while that all does sound really good, I think it's just like the expectation to get things out to the market faster, I don't think is necessarily the best thing all of the time ever, right? It's like, are we making sure that we've been immersed enough, the way we just, the start of this conversation, right? That like that we're informed enough that through the process that we've now expedited, that we're still staying true to the goal and the intention and the impact of what we're trying to produce, right? So I do caution some of that, and I'm not saying this is what you were saying, but caution some of it because like it feels like a shortcut, and it probably is, but just make sure that it's the shortcut for sound reasons, right? That don't
Okay.
make the quality or make the intention of the piece like diluted, you know?
Yeah. So let me then be more precise. It's like, I'm not saying that now a project that like used to take a month should take a week.
Right?
That's not what I'm saying.
No,
What I'm
exactly. Me
what
neither.
I'm saying is like, instead of like spending, I don't know, 3 days doing roto on a shot or two
Yep.
shots, like now I spend half a day doing roto, and then the other 2.5 day can be used for creative. And like,
Exactly. And
imagine
that's it.
having at your
That's it.
disposal like a render farm. Like,
Yep.
either it's you with your computer and your render is going to take 3 hours, and then you look at it and go like, shit, this is not good, I have to start
Yep.
again and lose again 3 hours. When you have a render farm, then you click in 3 minutes, you see the result and go like, okay, this is not good enough. And then
Moving on.
so it's that level of refinement. It doesn't mean like do faster, it means just like have more time to make things better.
Exactly.
um
And that's where we absolutely align, and what I wanted to emphasize to the audience, right? Is like doesn't mean faster. I mean just like putting creativity in the buckets it deserves to be in, right? Leveraging tools to support that, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
the thing you mentioned is kind of like the lie. That's what I mentioned, like about also about NFTs. When NFTs came
Right.
out, it's like, oh, everybody's gonna be rich and every artist is gonna be like living from his art and whatever, which in fact was like, again, like it's just a financial system. Um and to me, like the big lie now, with especially with generative AI, and you can read all those like stuff that I have to turn off on LinkedIn because I can't bear it anymore. It's like, hey, like,
Yeah.
before it took like a whole Hollywood crew to do this movie, and now you can do yourself in like wearing in wearing your underpants, and like just clicking and see the results. And like that's the false promise, because
Yep.
first of all, like, you're not like being creative, you're just like imitating something else. So first of all, you're not being creative, and secondly is like the result are not the same quality.
Yep.
And and then this is like the more spicy take. Also, it's like you're doing it on copyrighted material, like based on copyrighted material of like millions of artists that haven't been compensated. And so if your business model includes having to steal the entire world, that's not a business model.
No,
I'm sorry.
you're in for the
Um,
wrong reasons. Yeah. That's the difference of snake oil salesman versus alchemist, right? For
yeah,
keep going back to that. Yep.
it's again like, do I really want to subtitle by hand the whole like VO? No. Like, let do a robot do that. That task is not creative at all. It's just me listening and
Correct.
just typing things. And God knows, like I had to do that like years
Oh
ago,
yeah.
and it was
Oh
a
yeah. Oh
pain
man.
in the ass. So
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 grateful.
so please do, because then I have more time to like work on the edit, like on the sound design and compositing, and that's where like,
Take more care into the
yeah,
things that deserve it. Yeah, exactly.
correct. So to slowly land the plane in our conversation, um, we talked about where you are now. You know,
Mhm.
where do you think, or where do you want to be tomorrow?
The proverbial tomorrow. Um, wow, great question. I, as far as like the constructs of the business, right? Like I always found at my old agency that when the team was at that sort of like 10, 12, 15 people, it was awesome because we had like experts in key aspects of craft, right? We had the structure for the business to, had enough like sustainability in the relationships and in the repeat business and in the portfolio of work and the systems we had in place to support that, right? So I keep using this in like analogy publicly that like I climbed some sort of a mountain, I came back down and I'm trying to climb a similar mountain or like the same type of path, just like a little faster, right? Based on the knowledge that I had from that first ascent. So that's where I'm at now. So as in like tomorrow though, it's like recognizing that path is going to be another grind and another challenge. And that's cool. I'm up for it. Like, I think that's why we show up every day is to, I don't know, to be present and to put our best selves out there and to improve, right? So I'm here for it. So I think as long as like that attitude is resilient, I'm gonna be happy like wherever we are in this sort of state of the business, right?
You're still not telling me where you want to go.
I know, I know.
Don't
Well,
try to deflect.
yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, so I think the team is the first and foremost thing, right? Like having excellent people, creatives, humans, like supporting one another, supporting our clients and their audiences is the main thing, right? And then for me, I want to be able to be equally or more so present at home, right? Like my kids again are both under 10. They're just going to get older and there's going to be more activities and events and opportunities for them and for us as a family. So like uh you know we're taking our first family trip to Europe in a couple weeks and that feels like a new like unlock right in our family dynamic. So I'm really excited for all of those things, right? Um, but as far as like where to be, I think why I'm having a hard time answering that is that like I don't think there's necessarily like a destination at the end of all of this, right? It's like enjoying the prospects of modest growth, enjoying the prospects of really good work and camaraderie along the way, and serving great people behind great brands that are like set out to make an impact on the world and make it improved and better. Like I don't know, I don't think there's much more you can ask for, So I think I just want to be able to be present in those moments along the way and sort of just like acknowledge the wins, right? Like the small wins, the big wins, and like relish in them as appropriate. I think that's the state of being, right? Where I want to be. Yeah, that's a good question.
I will close it by retaining of everything you said one thing to summarize it. And is like be present. And the reason I'm asking this question like very often is because some people have their minds in the future. And by having their minds too much in the future, they're not like being present in the current moment.
Yeah.
There's certainly, as the strategist you are, you know that there's stuff you can plan ahead for the future, but like there's little you can control.
Yep.
What you can control is what's happening now. So I would like close it with that. It's like with that little nugget of like being present. So
Yeah.
Tim, thank you for being present with me.
Thank you.
And it was a pleasure to have you.
I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
See you soon in Bruges then.
Yeah, sounds great. See you there.
Take care.